Okay, today we're looking at Killing Floor Incursion. I'll be looking at a lot of RPG and fantasy games soon, trying to rein in my focus a little, but I have to get this one out of the way first. It's a new-ish, teleport-y, zombie-y, shooty game from Tripwire Interactive, and it's on the pricier end of the spectrum, coming in at £30 or $40. The original Killing Floor is a game I owned on release, and admittedly only played for about 6 hours. It's a cooperative first-person wave shooter, and it was good when it came out. It offered gratuity and difficulty, with fairly realistic weapons and a vaguely survival horror feel that was lessened by the fact you'd hopefully have a bunch of mates with you. I know it was loved by some, but for all of its low-budget charm, I just didn't get into it. Probably because Left 4 Dead fucking owned, and despite its differences, Killing Floor just felt like the less polished, less competitive, and less fun game by comparison. Apples and oranges, I'm sure, but that's what I thought. So when I said I had to get this one out of the way, that's really how it feels. I'm a bit late to the party, which doesn't help, but I felt genuinely disappointed with how this one turned out. And I don't really like making negative reviews, but since my main objective is to be a consumer advocate, I feel partly responsible for not putting my 2 cents out there at the right time, and possibly steering some of you clear of one you'd regret. There is always when it goes on sale, and new VR owners who I might help, and I'm interested to know if I'm the only one who was unhappy. So I'll keep it as short as I can, but just know that if I didn't have a backlog of fantasy VR stuff that I'm more interested in, I would totally have ripped this game a new one. The premise of Killing Floor Incursion is, at the gameplay level, very simple. It's an action first-person shooter, which involves you traversing fairly large, detailed and good-looking environments. You are able to select old-school locomotion if you look for it, but it's very tacked on, and the tutorial actually goes out of its way to give you a shitty explanation as to why it's totally normal to teleport. The tutorial attempts to explain how the constraints of VR actually make sense, and you're in a simulation, but they really should have just offered different comfort levels at the start. It's really as simple as saying, hey, you're probably going to feel sick if you use the free move button, and we don't advise it unless you're experienced in VR, or one of the lucky ones with an iron stomach. Then they could tell you how to access the options to change it at any time. If they had done this, the locomotion system might have been slightly more developed, and not have been an absolutely broken mess in boss fights. And it probably would have helped the plot by moving away from the awful simulation storyline. There's only 4 levels in the game, and the whole thing from start to finish, including a crash that made me replay the majority of the first level, came in at 2 hours and 45 minutes. And that really is everything, including a full 15 minutes from launch to the end of the tutorial. Each level has its own theme, which was nice. There's a decent visual variety. However, the way they justify the transitions and everything else was with one of the most offensively lazy plot devices possible. I'm sure some people will give me shit for caring so much about plot in a game where you're there to shoot things, but Killing Floor Incursion is an example of what happens when people cut corners. And I think we have enough VR games out there that developers can just act natural about it, instead of trying to break the fourth wall or come up with unnecessary ways to make the game world analogous to virtual reality. There's a reason that PC games don't come up with weird explanations as to why you're being controlled with a mouse and keyboard, or how Master Chief is a robot who is actually being manned by a US Marine with an Xbox controller, and that's because we've all agreed to suspend our disbelief. The major conceit of this game is that it's all taking place in a simulation. I don't think it adds anything to the plot, and I think that in general the game suffers for it. You're in a simulation whenever it's convenient, and because it's convenient. But don't just take my word for it, here are some examples. You're in a simulation and so you can teleport. Instead of writing dialogue to explain this feature, why didn't you just give 2 modes? All they needed to do was add a push the thumbstick into run type thing, and the boss fights where you need to move in quick bursts wouldn't have looked like this. You're in a simulation, and that's why your guns and knives and torch can all be dropped and returned to your person automatically. This one's actually pretty good in practice, but it's clearly there to make managing your weapons easier. The lack of downtime means that you can make things more hectic. And that would be fine if they made the combat hectic, but they didn't. It's easy as piss. You're in a simulation, so ammo and health and other consumables are dotted around randomly and without justification, because who likes having to pay attention? The level of hand-holding is ramped up as you can even get your helper to guide you to health, ammo, and your next objective. I know it's not a horror game, but there are horror elements. It's neither a hectic arcade game, nor an ammo-sensitive survival one. You're in a simulation, so enemies can appear out of nowhere. Slow enemies frequently appear a few meters away from you, and in general the spawns just feel unintelligent. And by that I mean, you'd think that if you could deploy your troops at will, that you'd coordinate them better. And the level design means that enemies will generally be spawning from a single spot ahead of you, and maybe if you're lucky, one ahead and one behind. It always felt very linear and straightforward, rather than a horde bearing down on you from all sides, and it really hurts the game.
I'll open a deletion portal. Just place the corrupted code into the portal to destroy it. That was odd. The virus code pieces should be random shapes, not... What's that? Gas mask.
You're in a simulation because it makes storytelling easy. Well, it does if you revolve the plot around vague threats of viruses and just throw out computery sounding words. It's not even just the vague annoyance of how the simulation is used as an excuse for every shortcut and limitation. There's also the absolutely horrible writing that goes with it. There's a very, very obvious "your helper might not be a good person" thread, and even that just feels like it's there to scapegoat the terrible writing. The problem is that what your helper says wasn't crafted and voice acted in a way that introduces some genuine suspicion. She doesn't say things that are subtly a bit off or a bit unnerving to clue you into it naturally. It just sounds like generic vague waffle about hackers and computer systems. It sort of occupies the background, but the gameplay and environments also do the same. So it's very hard to feel immersed or invested. Honestly, I'm not sure if they were trying to cultivate a tone and just failed, or if they just decided, that'll do. It's a shame too because the voice acting in general was fine. Absolutely good enough that with a better narrative and dialogue it would have helped the game overall. The next big issue for me is the movement. This game came out late enough into the Rift's life as a fully fledged CV1 that there's just no excuse for not knowing that people want locomotion options. I personally get offended when a game is designed around teleport, especially action and horror games, because it dumps on level design, natural feeling event triggers, and the pacing of combat. We need to get used to VR and to work on minimising sickness. I'm not about taking teleport away from people, do what you gotta do, but don't handicap me. I've already shown issues I've had with the boss fight because there's only one move speed, and maybe somehow I missed a button for that. It's well hidden if I did, but either way it's not as much of a problem as this. Teleporting out of bounds happens very easily in this game. The first time it happened, I closed the game after a while because I thought it was just boned. This isn't the nice kind of out of bounds where you can easily get back in. If you go out of bounds here, then good luck. I had to slowly recalibrate my way in during a boss fight using the Oculus home button. It's one of those things where even if there is an easier way of doing it, it wasn't obvious. It was a ball ache, and I can't believe it wasn't caught in playtesting. This boss fight also highlights how lame the teleporting is. You're on a rooftop, avoiding missiles shot by enemies. They shoot at your location, and as it comes to you, you'll have to aim your teleport and zip away. Just think about the difference that teleporting makes. There's no gradually leaving the blast zone, no situation where you're running low on life and you manage to get grazed by the bomb, but just scrape by. You just go from unsafe to safe in a flash. It completely kills the flow for me. Another big huge issue is the balance. When I got stuck in the wall the first time, I tried to die. And look how long it takes for this guy to kill me. When I do die, I didn't even get to die. In this game, you're in a simulation, don't forget. So when you die, you just come back. But don't die too much, because it's a simulation and your brain might melt. I get it, it's intended to be more of an arcade game than a survival game, but come on. Don't let them hit me this many times. In fairness, the bosses do more damage, but in general, the game is pitifully easy. It just feels really patronising. From the massively encouraged teleporting, the dialogue written for 10-year-olds by 10-year-olds, and the way that you can't fuck up no matter how much you try, unless you're innocently teleporting near walls. And the game is actually rated mature, so it seems to me like they just really underestimated their audience.
Impressive!
Damn it, now things are getting serious. That was some fine shooting, Lieutenant. More Zeds incoming. You need to keep them away from the life support programs. Remember, you're on life support. Every time they hit that thing, it's going to damage you too.
There's this bit later on in the game where you get the sniper rifle, and now you have to shoot waves of zombies trying to go and kill your cyber heart, so you better stop them or you'll die in real life, not just in the simulation. Okay, so round 1 and a few guys traipse out. Alright, that's fairly easy. Round 2, I bet this is going to ramp up, and it doesn't. Okay, round 3, alright, more of the same. That sucked. Okay, here we go, second section. This time round 1, there's a few more guys. Round 2. It's the same thing. Round 3. This fucking sucks. I just don't get it. Did they make it easier because they knew the sniper wasn't very easy to use compared to the other guns? Why did they want it to be so easy? Were they trying really hard to make sure that everyone can play to the point where no one should want to play because it's boring? The meager flow of enemies is an issue throughout the entire game. There are a few moments where shit sort of hits the fan, and you'll probably take a few knocks if you're not meticulously teleporting away. If you die, you really goofed. I mean, you can genuinely just swing your arms around and hit the zombies away from you. So I think that's pretty much all I thought about killing floor incursion. Oh, hang on, the ending is truly horrible. There's 3 options and they're all bad. In each one, people talk at you for a while and then it ends, but they imply that real things that aren't simulation based and might have been interesting to see are gonna happen. Basically, the least satisfying payoff imaginable. All static stuff with words, talking about exciting stuff that you don't get to see. The good ending is especially bad for this. It's actually so bad, it feels like the devs are running away from you, waving your £30 in one hand, laughing at you and giving you the middle finger. And I almost forgot the multiplayer. I didn't play the multiplayer, I didn't need to. The combat mechanics are pretty good, but nothing about having a friend with me would have made the game any better. If anything, I'd just be pissed that we threw £60 in on it. They did some ambitious things like boss fights, they created a decent combat system and good looking environments. Unfortunately, the end product gets major negative points for being short, shallow and expensive. And for that reason, I don't recommend killing floor incursion to anyone. Get yourself Arizona Sunshine if you don't already have it, maybe play it again if you're desperate. Or perhaps try Vindicta if you want another linear shooter with a lower price and more charm. That's all for this one. I've got some giveaways coming up, so make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss them. These will be just for my subs and I won't be advertising them, so you'll be in with a great shot just for leaving a comment on the relevant video. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time for a fantasy game VR review. Ooh, what could it be?